Good evening, you're watching Brass Tacks with me, Zakka Jacob. We're coming to you live from the CNN News 18 Primetime studio presented by Green Lamb Laminates. Donald Trump has stormed back into the White House as the 47th President of the United States, and he is not wasting a single second of business. On day one, he signed more than 200 executive orders, many of which reversed Joe Biden's key signature policies. Trump has pulled America out of both the Paris Climate Accord and out of the World Health Organization. He's also declared a border emergency and an energy emergency, vowing to send troops to the Mexican border if need be. He's even renamed the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. And in a significant decision, he has decided to end birthright citizenship, which could affect millions of H-1B Indian Americans and their children. But first, a capture of what a whirlwind day one it has been after Trump's return to the White House.
I'm fine with illegal immigration. I like it. We need people, and I'm absolutely fine with it. BRICS nations want to do that. That's okay, but we're going to put at least a 100% tariff on the business they do with the United States. You know what the BRICS is, right? So this is January 6th. These are the hostages. Approximately 1,500 for a pardon.
Yes.
Full pardon. Full pardon. We have about 6 commutations in there where we're doing further research.
So Donald Trump started off his presidency by signing a flurry of executive orders. This has now set into motion what he had promised on the campaign trail. He's announced severe restrictions on immigration as well as seeking refugee status or asylum in the U.S., declaring that he will send troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. He will also put an end to birthright citizenship. He's declared a national emergency at the southern border. The executive orders cover a range of topics. At least 78 of them were reversing actions taken by his predecessor, Joe Biden. Donald Trump signed an order for the U.S. to exit the World Health Organization. He insists that Washington is being unfairly paying more than China to fund the UN health body. He also immediately withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Accord, repeating an action that he had taken during the first term. Only 4 countries are out of the Paris Accords now. He also signed pardons for 1,500 of the January 6th rioters who were part of the Capitol attack that happened on the U.S. Capitol on the 6th of January 2021. Trump also announced that he would soon rename the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America. It's a decision that he's been speaking of since his re-election. Trump repeated various executive orders that promoted diversity programs and LGBTQ equality rights. One of his decisions on day one would now require federal workers to return to office for full-time work. Work-from-home allowances had skyrocketed during COVID because of the spread of the virus and restrictions therein. He's also stopped all government censorship. Combating inflation and bringing the American economy back on track has been his pitch through his campaign. He also signed an order for a trade overhaul. He has said that he's moving forward. The U.S. government will only recognize 2 genders, that's male and female. The president also ordered a 75-day pause and enforcing a law that would have effectively banned the Chinese app TikTok. He's now floated the idea of an American partnership with TikTok, whereby the American company will own 50% of the Chinese app. Trump has also decided to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. He signed an executive order to that effect. This decision now places the United States, the foremost superpower in the world, alongside the likes of just 3 other countries, Iran, Libya, and Yemen. So only 4 countries in the world are outside of this landmark 2015 climate pact. That could have several implications for the world. The U.S. withdrawal could hinder global efforts, raising emissions. The U.S. is currently the world's 2nd largest emitter of greenhouse gases, second only to China, and America departing from the Paris Accords undermines the global ambition to slash emissions to under 2 degrees over the next 10 years. The U.S. steps back and it weakens the influence that it has and other countries have in climate talks, particularly with China. It also risks undermining the U.S.'s ability to compete with China in clean energy markets, whether it's solar power, electric vehicles. Remember, he's also clawed back the electric vehicle mandate and clawed back on the Green New Deal. It will also cut climate financing that is vital for developing countries like India. The decision could also signal a rollback of U.S. climate policies, increasing the use of fossil fuels. Withdrawal from the agreement could also hurt America's own competitiveness when it comes to the clean energy market. But this fits with Trump's broader agenda to boost oil and gas drilling in the United States. In fact, "Drill, baby, drill" was a slogan that he often used during his re-election campaign and also in his inauguration speech last night. Donald Trump also used one of his executive orders to begin the process of withdrawing the United States from the World Health Organization. This is the second time he's done so. He did this when he was president in his first term as well. Many scientists now fear that this move could roll back decades-long gains that have been made in fighting infectious diseases like AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. This, scientists feel, would hinder the global ability to respond to whatever the next health emergency could be, the next pandemic, and it will likely put at risk programs across the World Health Organization, according to several experts, both inside and outside the WHO. The WHO's current funding is about $6.5 billion. A bulk of it, about a fifth of it, comes from the US alone. The United States would lose its role in shaping WHO policies and health strategies, and China could step in to fill that void. America could also miss vital health data and warnings affecting its national security and its public health. Health personnel who are working with the WHO could be recalled, and that could disrupt projects and collaborations which could impact not just the health of citizens in America, but also impact the health of citizens in other nations as well. Kevin Liptak is senior White House correspondent with CNN. He's now joining us. So Kevin, Trump has declared a national emergency at the southern border. What is the situation right now at the border? I believe that the number of so-called illegal crossings into the U.S. has fallen substantially in the last few months. What is the fate of millions who have crossed over in the last few months and indeed the last few years? What is their fate now with this flurry of executive actions that we've seen on day one of Trump's second term?
Well, it's an uncertain fate for those individuals, particularly those who crossed the border within the last 24 hours or so, who sort of underwent this transformation between the Biden administration and the Trump administration as they were crossing the border. And what you've seen is scenes of uncertainty, scenes of sadness with individuals who now are not certain whether they will be able to stay in the United States, apply for asylum, apply for parole. And I think in some ways that was the intention of President Trump as he came into office, really fulfilling the promises that he made as a candidate to crack down on illegal immigration into the United States and to begin what he calls mass deportations, beginning with criminals who are undocumented in the United States, but eventually, in his words, expanding to all of those who are in the United States illegally. And so this is a fulfillment of his campaign promises. But as you mentioned, border crossings were at really a low point as Trump was coming into office, helped by certain actions that former President Biden took while he was still in office. So Trump is inheriting, in some ways, a border situation that is better than it had been in years, but that hasn't necessarily stopped him from taking these actions that he took on his first day in office, including declaring a national emergency at the border, trying, in his words, to end the concept of birthright citizenship, which will be difficult. It is written into the Constitution. And certainly all of these actions that he took within the first 24 hours of being sworn in will be subject to immediate legal action on the part of immigration advocates in the United States. That's what typically happens when presidents take executive action as opposed to going through Congress to trying to make changes to immigration law in the United States. But I think it's clear from what President Trump has done since he's come into office is make this his central issue. It was a central issue for his supporters during the campaign, and now it's clear that he feels obliged to fulfill some of these promises now that he is here at the White House.
And also, one of his other big threats, he has not implemented it yet. He's not signed an executive order to that effect, but he has threatened to impose 25% tariff on all goods coming in from Canada and Mexico. He's also talked about 100% tariffs on imports coming in from BRICS countries. How much of it is actually feasible, or is this just a lot of Trump talk?
Well, that was one of the day one promises that he made as a candidate that he did not actually fulfill yesterday. Instead of imposing those 25% tariffs on the United States' North American neighbors, he signed a memorandum that directed his economic officials to investigate trade unfairness and deficits. And when we saw him in the Oval Office last night, he said he thought that he would apply those 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico on February the 1st. Whether that actually comes to pass is an open question, and it remains the fact that even a number of Republicans are opposed to that type of tariff because of the costs that would be passed on to American consumers. Trump was also asked last night about tariffs on China, another item that he's promised as a candidate. It remains true that a lot of the tariffs on China that he put in place when he was president the first time around were upheld by the Biden administration and remain in place today. Now, what actually happens on these tariffs, I think, is an open question. Between now and February 1st, certainly Trump will have a lot of conversations about this, potentially including with the leaders of those countries. So I think we'll just have to see what happens.
All right, Kevin Liptak, live for us from outside the White House tonight. Thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. Let's move on to a couple of his announcements, which could have down-the-line ramifications for India. He has, as Kevin said a moment ago, vowed 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada starting the 1st of February. But also in his press conference with members of the press, he threatened 100% tariffs on all BRICS countries. And of course, India is one of the founder members of BRICS. So should India be worried about potentially 100% tariffs going into the U.S.? The United States is India's top export partner. In fact, exports witnessed a 46% increase from 2020 to 2024. Indian exporters could also face higher barriers of entry, making their products less competitive within the United States. It could also lead to reduced sales and revenues for Indian businesses, potentially affecting both employment as well as economic growth within the country. If Trump were to implement a policy of reciprocal tariffs, where the United States matches the tariffs that India imposes on American goods, that could lead to increased costs for Indian exports, particularly affecting items like motorcycles, consumer products, agricultural goods, pharmaceuticals, textiles. All of these have faced the possibility or the prospect of high tariffs in the past. The maximum tariff, which is, as Trump is threatening, 100% on all imports from BRICS countries, if that were to happen, if we were to follow through on that, then that would shave off something like 0.3% of India's GDP. But a partial tariff would likely have negligible impact on India's GDP. It also has the potential to drive up consumer prices for American consumers as well as for Indian consumers. As tariffs increase the cost of imports, American companies may pass these higher costs on to American consumers, and that could lead to inflation as well. Another executive order that Trump signed specifies that for a child born in the United States to gain citizenship, at least one of the child's parents must be a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident or a member of the U.S. military at the time of the child's birth. He's ended the provision to provide automatic citizenship to children who are born in the U.S. to non-citizen parents. The Indian American community, which is one of the fastest growing immigrant populations in the U.S., will be profoundly impacted by this. Children born in the U.S. to Indian parents, regardless of their visa status, would no longer automatically receive U.S. citizenship. Indian immigrants are already facing long green card backlogs. In fact, last I checked, the green card backlog is over 11 years. Currently, they're processing green card applications that were filed in January of 2013. So that's 12 years now. That's the current backlog for green cards. This would further delay if the children are no longer entitled to birthright citizenship. US-born children will no longer be able to petition to bring their parents to the US after they turn 21 if they do not get birthright citizenship. That could lead to potential family separations and more legal hurdles. Children born to Indian students who are on non-immigrant visas could also face challenges while securing US citizenship, adding further uncertainty. The executive order could also create a significant legal gray area, particularly for children who are born to Indian immigrants who are on temporary work visas like H-1B visas, or those who are on an H-1B and whose green card is getting processed. Meanwhile, according to data from the US Census Bureau, there are over 5 million Indian Americans who are currently residing in the United States. It accounts for about 1.5% of the total US population. About a third of this 5 million are born in the United States, which means they are legal American citizens. But nearly 2/3 of them are immigrants, many of them on temporary work visas like the H-1B. With a majority of Indian nationals in the US currently on an H-1B, hundreds of Indian origin children who are going to be born in the United States will not be granted automatic citizenship, and that is a cause of concern for that population. Raymond Vickery is Senior Associate Wadhwani Chair of the US-India Policy Studies at the CSIS. Thank you very much, Mr. Vickery. First things first, a flurry of executive actions that Donald Trump has taken on day one in his second term in office. But I want to specifically focus on the knock-on effects on legal immigrants from India, particularly those in the science and technology field, highly skilled immigrants who come into the United States who are on temporary work visas, and this whole executive action to end birthright citizenship. How worried or concerned should members, or at least some members in the Indian American community, be because of this executive action?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think you've put your finger on what I consider the most important part of these executive actions, and that is an attempt to overturn the 14th Amendment, which grants birthright citizenship. This has vast implications. First of all, it's a completely lawless approach to governing. The Constitution, it doesn't matter if the great man decides that something else should be done. So from just a rule of law and our own democratic institutions, it is extremely serious. I think that the impact on U.S.-India relations, particularly the movement of people and intellectual activity between the U.S. and India is very much going to be affected if this is carried out. The first implication, as you have said, is on those people who are in the United States who have children who are born in the U.S. What does this mean? Does this mean that you tear the family apart, dividing those who are U.S. citizens from those who are not, who may be subject to deportation? That is extremely concerning. On the H-1B visa, as you know, there is a split among the advisors to Trump about whether or not this should be eliminated. Steve Bannon and his ilk are very much, and Miller is Trump's chief advisor on immigration, say, yeah, it ought to be cut back or eliminated. On the other hand, you have Elon Musk who's saying, no, it's a good thing. I don't think the president really understands H-1B. He said that he was all for it because he employed those H-1B visa holders in his own operations. In fact, he hasn't been. He has employed those from other countries on visas which are not those for technical. So he doesn't really understand the problem at this point. But it is the outcome of that is he says that he is going to reform it. Well, reform can be easily impacting U.S.-India relations. The only good news, I guess, is that he's kicked the can down the road on this horrible idea of imposing across-the-board tariffs on India and friend and foe alike. He says now it's going to be February 1. In my view, he has to kick that down the road because it's just an unworkable approach to U.S.-India relations and indeed economic relations with the world. We tried it back in the Depression and it didn't work. It made things worse. So it's a very difficult situation. And those who thought, well, it's going to not have any effect on U.S.-India relations, It seems to me have to take another look now, and it's time for India, as a great democracy, to step up and try to ameliorate the harm which can be done to our great democracies and the relationships we've had.
All right, Mr. Vickery, we'll leave it at that. We'll see how this plays out. As of now, every country around the world, whether you're big, small, technologically advanced, developed, developing, every country seems to be affected either directly or indirectly by the series of executive actions that Donald Trump has taken. And there's going to be more. We've just gotten started. It's just day one. There's going to be another full 4 years of what is likely to be a very disruptive second term by the 47th President of the United States. Meanwhile, at the inauguration ceremony, in fact, right after it, there was a video showing the US tech billionaire and the largest contributor, the largest donor to Donald Trump, Elon Musk. He made a one-armed gesture during a speech at the Donald Trump victory rally on Monday at the Capital One Arena. That video has now gone viral. Internet users are comparing it to a Nazi salute. Controversy erupted when Elon Musk took to the Capital One Arena stage. This was in Washington right after Trump's swearing in. There were huge cheers. He himself seemed to be quite pumped up. He was pumping his fist. He was shouting as a mark of victory and enthusiasm. And then he thumped his right hand over his heart. He spread his fingers wide, extended his right arm out emphatically at an upward angle. His palm was down and fingers together. That right away, the moment he made that gesture, people started comparing that to the Hail Hitler Nazi hand gesture that was very popular during the Second World War. Then he turned and made the same hand gesture to the crowd that was standing behind him. Musk, of course, has responded to the criticism of the hand gesture. He's called it a tired attack. He took to social media, the platform X, which he owns, and he said, and I quote, "Frankly, they need better dirty tricks." And talking about tech billionaires and tech bros, just hours after Donald Trump took oath as the 47th President of the US, the White House announced that the Indian origin entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy will no longer be part of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, for which Trump had selected him to lead it alongside Elon Musk. Meanwhile, the Government Efficiency Advisory Group in a statement has praised Vivek Ramaswamy for his critical role in helping form DOGE. Ramaswamy has signaled that he plans to run for governor of Ohio next year. If he wins that election, he would become the first ever Indian American governor of Ohio. The Indian American had an unsuccessful run during the Republican presidential primary. Later, he endorsed Trump and very quickly emerged as one of Trump's close confidants.